Dr. Jennifer Mullan is a major disruptor in the mental health industrial complex. Her work is an urgent call to dive to the root of global and generational trauma to unlock the wisdom of our sacred rage. Dr. Jenn birthed Decolonizing Therapy, a psychological evolution that weaves together political, ancestral, therapeutic, and global well-being. She is also the creator of the popular Instagram account at Decolonizing Therapy and recipient of Essence Magazine's 2020 Essential Hero Award in the category of mental health. Dr. Jenn is the author of Decolonizing Therapy, Oppression, Historical Trauma, and Politicizing Your Practice, which has ignited a fervent wave of acclaim and community support as a national bestseller. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unfolding, presented by the Loveland Foundation. I'm your host, Rachel Keener, and today we are joined with the amazing Dr. Jenn, aka the Rage Doctor. Hi, Dr. Jenn.
Hi, Rachel. So good to be here with you and the Loveland. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. No, I remember we met back like last year at the New York brunch that Loveland hosted. And I remember when you were talking, I was like, oh, I like her. I want to talk to her some more and see what she's got going on. I think your book had just released. Decolonizing Therapy was just released, or it was in the process of being released. And I just loved everything about it. And the fact that you went by the Rage Doctor, and I was just like, whoa, I never thought of rage as something, I always thought it was something you should avoid, or not feel. And so someone who's said, oh, I'm the Rage Doctor, it's oh, I wonder if she's healing rage or people with anger issues, but it's actually quite the opposite. So just to dive in, how do you find rage? How did you coin the name the Rage Doctor? What's been your rage journey, so to speak?
Ooh, I love that. What's your rage journey? Yes, Rachel. Thank you. Well, I think this is my favorite topic to talk about, ever in the world. Maybe next to crystals and cats. I don't know. But honestly, my prior students, when I worked at the university, coined the Rage Doctor and started calling me the Rage Doctor, because at that time when I worked at a university counseling center, teaching, grants, doing peer education, co-facilitating an LGBT support group, not working enough. When I was doing all of this, a lot of times professors would give us a call, or they would say, I'm really concerned about this person. Can we send them over to you? They knocked over the desk and walked out, or they cuss me out in the middle of a meeting, or the student comes in and slams their books down and looks at everyone like they want to punch them in the face, or they got into a fight on the field. And, so a lot of times those students would come to me, or they would join my peer education group, and or I would do group work with them, do little workshops. And I loved it. And my goal was to teach them what I had learned years before with my mentor, Ruth King, the author of Healing Rage, Women Making Inner Peace Possible, was that rage is your sacred barometer, right? That rage has a desire to be seen by you. Your rage has a desire to be seen, acknowledged, tended to by you. And when we continue to ignore, when we continue to avoid and sidestep, when we continue to dig it, kind of bury it, dig deep like a dog, and and treat it like poo. I'm going to use that. When we do that, we're avoiding something that is an embodied response. We're avoiding something that is desiring to really help and support us, to be honest. Yeah. Because if I use Ruth King's original definition in their book, it is that rage is the love child of childhood trauma, and shame.
Oh,
right? Childhood trauma, whether neglect, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, some kind of loss, massive grief, migration, right? Some kind of childhood trauma. Think of adverse childhood experiences scale, plus shame, shame for feeling, for being, for dealing with this trauma, ... But my kind of add to this would be, and from working with students for so many years and a bunch of other people and my own, right?
Yeah.
Is that Rage, sacred rage, is the love child of ancestral trauma,
Ooh.
suffocated grief, and shame. And what I mean by that is that anger is pretty commonplace and it's not rage. Anger is sort of, I get pissed off, I stub my toe. I might be angry with my partner for not putting down the seat, right? Like I might get, annoyed that someone cuts me off within 3 inches and also, almost risks my life in their life, right? Like we're angry. Maybe we get a bad evaluation and we're like, wait, you don't really see me. That's really messed up. Like that's not true. This is what I do. But rage would be getting that evaluation and having a snap moment where you come out your face. I don't know if you ever heard of, like, I'm not a fan of David Chappelle at this time, but growing up, it was a large part of my life, right? I just want to call that out right there. And right now, right now, I'm like, you done, whatever. But when growing up, there was this skit where it was like, when keeping it real goes wrong. Okay. And that's what reminds me of rage, where it's like, we don't have a filter. Where it's jumping out of your body. Not that we want you to jump out of your body, not that we want you to lose your job, not that we want you to curse out someone, but rage often feels like you can't see. For some people, they feel choked up. It becomes visceral and embodied. Some people start shaking. Some people start crying. I used to cry and like almost like pat my, like I would have this like almost like primate. Like hitting like not to harm myself, but just like
how you couldn't get it out in some way.
Yeah. Right. And trying to hold back whatever I felt like could come out to this person or people. Right. And the thing about the ancestral part of rage is that likely whatever's happening in the moment isn't just about the moment, because then that would just be anger, big anger. Right. Right. I'm like, I'm so pissed off. Like, that's not necessarily rage, right? Rage is literally also physiological, literally, right? It is part of your fight, flight, freeze, back of the brain stem response. Okay. I just want to like separate them, right? And so people are like, oh, we're so ragey. There's a difference between angsty, emo, irritable, nasty, and rage. And that's why I like to say that it's like sacred, meaning special, deserving of attention, calling for attention, deserving our eye. Yeah. And oftentimes in an individual, when that rage doesn't get some attention, when we're not journaling about it, maybe when we're not letting it out, whether it's shaking, safely punching pillows, safely screaming somewhere, kickboxing somewhere, rage retreat, like when we're not asking questions like, what does my sacred rage want to tell me today? Right? We run the risk of spewing and harming others. Yeah. So often what happens also then in community or collective, as we saw in 2020 with all the violence on Black bodies. Yeah. What we saw was appropriately individuals' current day environment waking up older traumas, right? That probably existed before they were born.
Yeah.
You feel me? Generational trauma of enslavement, of lynching. Sorry to make it so deep, but like,
no, that's what it is though.
Forcing, right? Or residential schools, if you're indigenous, native, right? Like, so what I'm trying to say is that current day activations or triggers that are already a lot further become like volcano when older traumas that are already in our DNA and body kind of say, whoa, boundary. This isn't safe. This isn't safe. Someone making these decisions on our body, mind, and spirit policies, not safe, right? Yeah, that was a lot, but
I love the background and also this distinction between rage versus anger, because I think a lot of times, even myself, I just assume they're one and the same. Like it kind of like how like happiness and joy kind of like you think they're the same, but they're very different. I wonder that like even for myself, like rage and anger, as I've always very much quiet those sides of me, and I never really wanted to like tap into it just because like, you know, you don't want to be like seen as like the angry Black woman, or you don't want to like be like, but in that process, you're like rejecting a part of yourself that needs to be released. And so like, how does one like tap into their rage in a safe way? I know you mentioned like pillows and like screaming softly, but sometimes like I feel like rage, I don't even know it's there until it's there, you know? And so how do you like quiet, kind of like tend to it, nurture it, and like let it have its space?
Yeah. Well, I keep telling folks that we need to build a relationship to it, right? It's like asking an 8 or 12-year-old, right? Or 14-year-old or 15-year-old, we're besties. They're going to look you up and down, likely, and either roll their eyes or laugh in your face.
Mhm.
Right? Very rarely will a teenager immediately or a toddler be like, yeah, I trust you. Right? If we have pushed something away for a really long time, why would it trust us? Right? Why would it connect with us? Why would it bond to us? So building that relationship might look like having a little corner or a sacred space or an altar or a shelf where we add some things that remind us of our childhood rage, of our teenager rage self, of times maybe when our power was taken away. So I have a picture on my little rage altar of me at the beach feeling comfortable in a bikini with my belly hanging out at like
Yeah.
3, you know? And I'm just like living my best life. My hair is wild and, you know, my chunky little arms and my chunky little legs and
Why?
right. All I need is me, that sand, that water and beach ball and give me some ice cream later. You know, like
Ooh,
that's
awful.
it. And so I realized through some meditations, through journeying, some visualizations, that anyone can do, right? As part of like the work that I do with people is that my inner rage child is both me at that age when I started like having a voice with adults in my life and they started feeling like, oh, she's too grown or you need to be quiet or you think you're really smart, but this is adult business. Like, da, 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 da. And I would feel constantly like shut down. Like
Yeah.
folks weren't as a child amplifying my voice. Right. And I had some traumatic things happen to me that I didn't remember until later around 3, 4, 5. Right. So my little inner rage child is there. And then I also have a grandmother who is like my ancestral rage ancestor. My rage ancestor is someone who has been through a lot of trauma. Right. And someone that wasn't always wise in it, but that I can learn from.
Mm.
That makes sense? That I can learn from. That I can
Yeah.
also, that she might guide me depending on who you are and how you work, right? Whether you do ancestral work. And so I would say you build the relationship the way you would with anyone that you're meeting or dating. Methodically, slowly, kindly, consistently showing up, right? Because the thing with rage is that it wants an audience. And you better
Ooh.
be the audience, right? You got to
Yeah.
be the audience first. And that's why spoken word poetry is powerful and healing for people. That's why group and group work is powerful and healing for people. And that is why we often find individuals that really enjoy like acting, singing, drag, like ways to express a side of us that society has said no to or stop or that's not warranted. Does that make sense? So becoming more of our full self or finding expression in our full self allows for that rage. So people think that it's always like, you got to punch, you got to scream, you got to kick, but that's a part of it.
Yeah.
That's like 20%, 50, but for not everyone, not everyone's nervous systems are ready to do that. Right. So if I do retreats with folks and when I have with my students for years and we did rage retreats, hey, I'm making sure that someone is mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically ready for that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Cause
It's
right. Cause everyone's fear is, what if I don't come back? What if I don't stop? What if I harm somebody? I don't know what'll happen if I really let it all go. Right. Most of us say that. If I really let all this rage go, what will happen?
do you see people letting it all go, or is it just like a way like do you see how oh, okay.
Um, well, they let it all go in the moment. And then, you know, we're human. And then the next day they get up and they're pissed off at something else, right? So it's always deep. And I think as long as there's like structural systemic inequities and violence and abuse in this world and genocide, right? As long as families are being torn apart, as long as there's racism, as long as there's sexism, unfortunately, ableism, like as long as these things exist, fat phobia, like as long as all of that exists, there's a part of us and our ancestry that are always going to be reaching, right? Like always going to have it. But do I walk around ready to, metaphorically or not, knock someone's head off the way that I did when I was in my teens or 20s? Absolutely not. Does it come out of me occasionally in road rage or not real road rage? New York and New Jersey. So the horn is a real thing, and cussing someone out in your car with music, like, but
like a hand motion, like,
like you know, or like driving past and looking at the person all hard, like
you're gonna see people look at you, okay? Like you're gonna feel them
and they're looking away, like, oh, why are we like this? Right? Like that's the reality. Is like there's always gonna be something, and those little moments are indicators for us that we haven't been paying attention. Right? Right. And I don't mean always, because sometimes something happens out of nowhere that is so like, how dare you? Right? Like that we have to set that boundary. But part of it is that if we're constantly popping off on someone, like our closest loved ones or strangers or both or whatever, or snapping at children if we work with them, or our children or our nibblings or nieces, nephews, if that's constantly happening, that agitation is a signal that your rage is being a neglected child right now, is neglected. Like it's almost like not feeding an animal that you have, right? Like, you know, like, so eventually they're going to bite.
They're going to get
right?
feral.
They're going to be in the corner and they're going to bite because you haven't fed them. You haven't paid attention to them. You haven't given them water. So they're feral, right? Does that make sense? And on the other end, and then we wonder why. Just like, you know, if Black folks or women identified or non-binary people are constantly feeling ignored or rights are taken away, or you feel like it's unsafe to simply drive in certain places or be in certain places or work out or walk in certain places. That happened to me this morning, right? Then we're going to constantly feel on alert when an environment is adequately and accurately not safe for us. Right. So our rage will be on alert because all it's doing is setting boundaries. All it's doing is, this is what it's doing. We good? We're it's like, that's how I describe it. Right? Like your rage is on alert. So in a way, the more that we build that relationship and pay attention to it, the more beneficial, the more our intuition is on, the more we don't need to be on high alert, but that we can observe and be like, we got this. We got this. This is not going to happen again. Right? We're all right. We know how to set limits. We know how to this. We know how to that. And there's another part that I want to say to answer your question is that, you know, also having a rage release, as long as it doesn't mean punching someone in the face or killing someone or sexually harming, you know, like I'm not talking about something that involves another person and harming them, because that should never be allowed, right? Like we don't get that right to do that, although we might want to, right? But I do think like a child having a real reaction, someone in a partnership that can't take something anymore and something keeps happening, or they feel gaslit, or sometimes those moments happen where we're like, no, you will not, you know, I say, welcome it, be with it, honor it. Like it is a function of white supremacy to simply keep saying that being smiley and amenable and professional, whatever that means, and just happy all the time. And like, that's always how it should be. We were given this feeling of rage because we should be allowed to feel it. Right? We should be allowed to feel it. And so, as you said, like this whole angry Black woman, that's a trope, right? Yeah. That's a form of racism, right? And anti-Black racism, right? Especially the darker someone is. Yep. Right? Colorism is involved in it, without a doubt. And in a million ways, it is really important to see how darker Black bodies are always unsafe when they rage. Right. And so my goal in this world is to make it as safe as possible for all of us, for like all people, because it's also important to note that we don't also talk about white rage a lot. Like, look at the Alabama brawl. Baby. Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Right. When you think about it, like, that was white narcissism, and that was a lot of other things, but it was also a form of white rage.
Supremacy.
Yes,
Yeah.
right? Like, it was also a form of, like, that white rage that we don't talk about. We talk about black rage, there's songs about it, there's books about it, but also that white rage is dangerous because it can take us out. We can lose our jobs, right? We can get arrested, we can
Yeah.
get killed.
Yeah.
If no one saw that and it was nighttime, that person might have been drowned. God forbid. Like, my brain went to, and when homie threw up the hat,
Oh my goodness.
across the world, our bodies got goosebumps.
We all felt like so excited. Like I remember like it was like my phone was blowing up, just like everyone's sending links, everyone's sending thought pieces, because like it's rare that you see Black people come together and like win too against like something that's like we're so used to saying like, oh, like at first it's like, oh my god, I hope he's okay, like what's gonna happen, and to see like that like not feel like that like anxiety about it, like, oh, like something to root for, something to cheer for.
Yes.
It felt so
It felt
good.
unreal. Even now, as you're talking and we're saying it, I'm like, you know, they're like, we got a man, a young man jumped in the water and swam across.
Black people can swim, yes, like and do it well.
The head it went up. Then you had 3 fellas walking forward. We were like, yeah, you know, and it was just about safety, not being alone, community, right? And like, please, witnesses.
Yes.
Hopefully enough witnesses that this person doesn't lose their job, that the other staff don't lose their job, right? The chair, we got earrings, clothing. I have a t-shirt.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And I think it also is a representation of how often, right, that level of white rage goes under the rug, right? Goes without any kind of repercussions, right? So I think we also have to talk about rage in terms of who's allowed and who gets penalized or killed for it. Generally speaking, right? Even when we look at, you know, shootings, mass shooter events, right? When we look at who has been gunned down immediately and killed, right? And who gets to walk away, and they're like, oh, this teen had mental health issues, and maybe they did, and maybe they didn't. But that same courtesy is also not given to a bunch of other people that are now dead. You didn't shoot them in the knee. You didn't shoot in the air and get them to stop. Like, you totally took them out. And it makes me think of like Tamir Rice. It makes me think of Philando Castile. Like, you know, some of the names that we know where, you know, Breonna Taylor, what happened to Sandra Bland? Like, you know, it's like, it's really important for us to realize that mistakes, right, for Black bodies often means my life now has drastically changed and I might not survive this. Like, right? And so this has everything to do with rage because, you know, frequently when I say the word rage, if we're really honest, folks, even Black folks will think, oh, we're talking about Black people, right? We're talking about like, or we're talking about Black women going off on someone, Black women in family, right? And the reality is that's our own internalized colonizing brain, right? That's our own internalized oppressor. That's our own ways of trying to separate ourselves from others, when in the reality, anyone has the capacity to, that's why we call it snapped, to snap. Right? And so my thing to this world is like, you can just snap, but let's keep us safe. Wouldn't it be nice if we could build a relationship to that rage prior to the next snap out, so you don't ruin your relationship, your bestie, you know, you don't ruin anything with your children and harm them, right? Or you teach your children you're role modeling healthy rage. Like, it's okay, I think, for children to see us really, really enraged and pissed off. It's okay. Like, I remember my friend and children were around with a trial for Trayvon Martin, and it was like breaking news that we were going to hear what the verdict was. And I said to her, like, oh, I don't know if you want little man to be here for this, and and she's like, no, Jenn, like, he needs to know that this can happen to his body, right? That this can happen to him. And she's like, and I need to feel this. We were crying. We were screaming at the TV. We were hugging each other. Like, it was like, it was my nephew. Like, I can't explain it. Like, it was like such a visceral, like, how dare you? Like, how dare you kill this baby? Because he's a baby. He was a baby, right? Over some Skittles and whatever he stole, right? Like, how dare you? And the thought is that rage also means that we love really hard. Really, what rage is I love you so, so, so much, even if I don't know you. And I care for you so much that I can't accept this, that I won't accept this. And I care for maybe people, right? Or I care for humanity, or I care for the earth so much that I'm going to put my body, mind, and self on the line, because every ancestor in me is like, oh no, not today, not on our watch, never again.
Yeah. You talk a lot. I remember Trayvon Martin the most because we were the same age, around the same age. And that was like my first, like, oh, this is real. Like, you grow up hearing about like how Black people are treated differently and like shootings and whatnot. But like when you're like, and also the age of social media, like that was my first time like on Twitter and like on like all these places and like seeing like the aftermath of it and be like, wow, like someone who like I could know, someone who like could like be like a brother or like a friend to me, and like such a sweet face, like a face that I've seen so many times at like family barbecues or like in classrooms, and like to have that be taken, a life so precious, and then like for it to not get like any justice whatsoever. I think that was my first time experiencing something where it's like, why do I feel so uneasy? Why do I feel so like angry? And I didn't know where to put that or what to do with that. And talk a lot about like community stuff. And like I remember like talking about with friends and talking about with family, and also like this feeling of like grief for someone you don't know, but so like it felt like someone you do know, and then like how you talk a lot about how grief and like plays a role in the rage, and like grief plays a role in love. But yeah, how do, how do you like deal with that? How do you like sort that out? How do you like live in the two worlds of like grief, love, and rage all together, and like healing from that as well? And also
great
like
question.
ancestral grief. Yeah. So like
no, this is a great question because, ancestral grief feels like it just knocks us on our behind.
Yeah.
Just like a tidal wave, and that grief, sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I feel so quote unquote depressed, or I can't move, or my body hurts. Right. And, lately I've been saying, what if, and again, just what if a lot of that grief is an accumulation from people before us in our lineages and not just our own. I'm not talking about the kind of grief that you can get through in a day or two.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the kind of grief where you feel like floodgates are opened, right? Where, things that make you feel better are often things that are older memories, pictures. Sometimes I've recommended to people, if they have the ability and they can, and they have the privilege to see if they can visit their homelands, right? Because that is a way also to feel much more grounded, centered, and connected. I also recommend to people to find a familiar group with that identity that might be coming up, because sometimes what I think happens are folks are frequently stuck in this place where they're embarrassed and ashamed for the grief. Yeah. Why do I feel like this? I shouldn't feel like this. Why do I this? Right? Like, leaders like, gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I shouldn't be crying like this. I shouldn't be depressed. I should be able to get out of bed. I have so much to do. But guess what? When we think of some of the things that our people have not, whoever your people are, right, have not been able to grieve.
Yeah.
Right? Just gotta like suck it up and move on. Think of war. Right? Like, I can't imagine nonstop war for 10 years.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being born into war. Some of us were in other countries, this country, like, I'm also thinking of the 9/11 babies the kids that were born right around then when, when a lot of the country were grieving, especially in the New York, New Jersey area. Right. I think about what happened in 9/11 and I get emotional because I saw it. I was in it. I was part of it. I mean, I wasn't there, but I lived right across the thing and we watched it go down. Right. So I
Wow.
think about like, if that has such an impact on me to this day to tell my story about it, what happened to someone who was like born into the world around that level of collective grief, right? Because no matter what the reason is, it's scary. It's a
Yeah.
big event, right? Something big fell, right? If we lived in this area, there was an odor of death in the air for, weeks.
Stays.
Yeah, right. Our lives couldn't go on as regular. We were all in watching TV over and over and over and trying to get answers of what was going on. And so imagine that all over the globe, right? As it is happening now and it is happening all over. What does that do to us? And right, our nervous systems just have to go. We just have to go, right? And we have to survive. And so survival doesn't make space for grief or rage usually in the time. I mean, it might if it means like combat, right? Like, yeah. But usually, you're crying for a little bit and you're going, or you're looking for food, or you're helping someone with their medical needs, or you're right. Like everything
You
is
always have
about
something to do or something to focus on, except
yeah,
like the rage
yes,
that you're.
yes.
Yeah.
The grief, like the grief. Not that you don't feel it if like someone died or someone passed
Yeah.
away, even in that moment. But the grief requires a falling apart in some ways.
Mm. No, I remember my dad passed about like 5 years ago, and I
I'm so
remember it
sorry.
was. Thank you. I remember like right when it happened, I felt like, oh, like shock. And then with the planning for the funeral and like the going through memories and stuff like that, like having like there's so much to do, so much like planning you have to do in like a short amount of time. And like that part didn't seem as like heavy to me. It just seemed like, okay, to-do list, checklist, get it done. And then
Yes.
like it wasn't until like after the service and like after some time, like people stopped checking in and just like you kind of just like go on with your life. That you're like, oh, like it's still in me. You know what I'm saying? This grief is still in me. And then like I don't think grief will ever leaves you. I think it just like transforms in different ways. And like I've seen it transform in so many ways. And I feel like in the sense that like grief is just part of who I am now. You know, I feel like I'm constantly grieving, but not in a way that's like I'm boohoo crying. Sometimes I am, but I also see the world differently and I see it through a grief lens and I see it more people who are experiencing grief. And so like on that small level, like not small level, but like losing a parent, but then I think about like everything happening in the world and like genocides and like people losing like their homeland or people losing like their like whole system of people, their whole like knowing of like what they've been through. Like, I'm just like, what does that grief look like years from now? Like what, like how did these people like carry that grief and what is that grief going to turn into and manifest itself as? Like
Yeah.
how, because grief needs support. Like you said, like rage needs the audience. I also feel like grief needs an audience as well. Like grief needs to be seen and needs to be like empathized with. Like I always felt the best when someone's like, hey, like your dad used to do this, or like, oh, I remember like your grandma doing this, or like, oh, like how are you doing? Like I know this, like something about being seen in your grief just is so comforting, you know, and like what is it going to look like when like so many people are grieving so much and like are we seeing it, are we doing anything about it? So yeah, it's just
All of it. Thank you for sharing that. That's really important. And thank you for sharing about like when folks leave and you're still grieving. That's that it's there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
One thing I am curious about though, you talked a lot about rage and like snapping and like how to prevent it, but like what happens if you do snap, you know, and like is there like a aftercare plan or like how do you, because sometimes there's things you can't take back, but like if someone does have a moment of like intense rage and like they haven't been like prepared for it, like how do you come back from that?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, when I have moments of when I have had intense moments of like snapping out, whether I thought I should have or not, I think almost immediately there is a shame that floods the body. right? There's a feeling of, oh my gosh, most people don't feel good about that rage, right? Even if they're acting like they are beforehand, right? Even if it's like all tough and everything
Go ahead.
afterwards, especially if we feel like we made a fool of ourselves, or we could get fired, or a relationship might be over now, or, we've harmed someone we love emotionally, physically, in some way. First is like getting to safety, making sure that person or situations are safe enough, whatever that means. That's going to look different for every situation, right? Like, but maintaining that other people are well, maintaining, are we well, right? Like, are we well in the brain? Are we well in the mind? Where do we need to go physically, mentally, emotionally to get back? And so I know that when I do rage retreats with people, we always have spotters. We don't let people just wild out on their own. There's always someone else with them. Like, do you need water? Do you need this? Let's go here. Let's take a breath. Like, there's always someone there. And then usually at the end of this release, there's a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Right? After a rage, or a lot of, right? Because again, fight, flight, freeze, right? The nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system is like deeply activated and is still likely assessing for threats. And so you're going to be exhausted and tired. And so normally I tell people, go to sleep, rest.
Okay.
And so in a rage retreat, we wrap people up in blankets. We ask them what they want to eat or drink. If they need anything, we bring them a journal, right? We give them an ability to like kind of feel like a little wrapped up burrito, Sometimes if people are open for it, we gently whisper affirmations at them that they want to hear, that they've told us about prior. It's kind of like a let's come down. Music can be really helpful. Rocking back and forth, or some kind of like somatic exercise to regulate the nervous system, right? Really, 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 really important. And the vagus nerve, we want to like get everything nice and calm. So that's the first step. But the second step, or that's maybe step 1, 2, 3. But then the next phase of it is also like coming to terms with what happened and why. Hey, and that might take days, that might take weeks, that might take talking to someone else, or a therapist, or a bestie, or maybe that person doesn't want to talk to you anymore, or maybe now you don't have a job, right? Like, right? So it's sort of like, okay, do you have to take responsibility? Are you ready to accept responsibility? Have you really harmed? And like with anything, we have to take responsibility if there has been a harm, right?
Yeah.
For some people, sometimes, and again, I think it's situational, because some people rage by saying, oh, that's it. No, I'm not talking about this. They leave and then they punch their hand against a wall and break their hand, right? And maybe it's not in front of anyone, but they have to deal with the repercussions now of hospital bills, a broken hand, a bruised ego, right? Bruised emotional heart. What did I do? How did I get here? This is embarrassing, right? And so for someone else, they might have harmed someone else and that's it, right? Meaning there's no more contact, or that person has called the cops.
Yeah.
So everyone is going to have a different repercussion, all right? And that, again, that is the hope, is that we minimize repercussion and guilt and shame. And we start to really focus on the prevention, relationship building.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get to a place where it is destroying lives. And sometimes I also have to say substances are connected to rage releases, not always, but sometimes, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of students that would come into me, not because they wanted to work on their rage, but there are times like they were in really toxic relationships and they'd go out drinking or doing some drugs with friends. And I wasn't judging that. It was more that by 3, 4 in the morning, my client has lost a shoe, doesn't know where their purse is or their ID, hair is all over. They're screaming up in their partner's face, mushing them. The partner's like, you better stop or I'm going to hit you back. They're scratching each other, trying to grab at each other. People are putting their lights on, calling cop.
Yeah.
Or they're in the corner vomiting, crying, telling everyone, F you, I fucking hate you. right?
Paint the picture. Yes.
Friends are walking home and no one knows where they are and it's pitch black and it's dangerous or they've gotten assaulted. And recently, like rage sometimes goes along with substances as a way for people to try to release and cope with that grief. Did I answer your question?
You definitely did. I'm just processing it all because, like, there's
Yeah.
so many, like, you mentioned so many, like, self-soothing techniques to, like, help with that and, like, after and, like, the rocking and the music and, like, also just being wrapped up, just being, like, held and, like, taken care. Because I think, like, for at least for me, like, rage is such a rare thing for me that, like, when I do experience it or feel it, I also feel a bit isolated or a bit lonely with it, and so having that part of, like, how to feel, like, taken care of or, like, held in that moment, and
Yeah.
yeah, I love the breakdown of that, so thank you. I know we're coming close to our time, but our theme for, this year of podcast is all about self-discovery, and how cool was it to see, like, in the first line of your book was, this quote by Aoife, I believe, is like, "May the blessings of self-discovery, may the journey of self-discovery bring you the blessings of spirit." And I sat with that for a minute and I was like, wow, like, may that be the case. Like, may it bring you many blessings. So I guess I just want to ask, like, what blessings has self-discovery brought your spirit, you know?
What a beautiful question. Let me see what blessings. Okay. I would say some of the blessings have been being able to teach it and pass it forward. I think that throughout majority of my life, I've felt like worked on myself because things felt broken, right? Either relationships felt broken, parental relationships, or I felt inadequate or unlovable or any of these things. And frequently there was a sense that I had to get better, make it right. And sometimes I did. Sometimes it was my fault, right? But ultimately, through different teachers, therapists, healers, different retreats I went on or things that I did, travels I did, ultimately, I was able to learn a lot about what healing is and the difference between treating and healing and the difference between covering a wound and like getting at the root and addressing and right, like healing up that wound. And so I do believe that my journey of self-discovery allowed me to, create decolonizing therapy in co-creation
Mhm.
with my ancestors, and I think it allowed me to be better
Yeah.
at understanding humans and myself and being more compassionate, to be honest
Mm,
with you, right? Because even though I talk about rage and I talk about the colonial wound and I'm talking about these heavy things, at the root of it all is wanting us all to get to the root of things, wanting
yeah.
us as much as we can, right? You can't do that all day, every day. I don't recommend it.
It's
But
exhausting.
too much, right? But and I've been there too, where it's always like deep, 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 right? And then people are like, "It's okay, you can come up for air."
Yeah.
No, no, it's bigger than this,
It makes me
right?
lighten.
But I think ultimately, I have become a better daughter, sister, friend, partner, cat mom, teacher, Western psychologist, even though I'm not practicing in this moment in that way. And I'm better able to communicate about rage and grief and colonization to people because not only have I looked at it in myself and in my lineage, but I'm holding myself accountable for
Mhm.
not just saying, oh, I'm done learning about myself and the world. I'm good. I've checked off a box.
No.
Certified, you know? So yeah, I think I'm a better person, but I also feel like I'm a better teacher, if that makes
Mm,
any sense.
that makes perfect sense, and I've learned so much from you from reading your book and also from just talking to you and just sharing space with you, so stay on that journey because it's a beautiful journey to witness.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for this time and this conversation. I feel like anytime I can talk about rage and let people see the other sides of that rage. And that rage is really sort of like a neglected aspect of the world and of our soul.
I'm happy with my rage. Like,
Right?
I decided to like get to know my rage and like welcome it more and like experience it more. And I feel like this conversation has allowed me to like be like, oh, like where can I step up in that way? And where can I connect with myself in a way that like I'm not dismissing parts of me that I know are inside.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You mentioned Rage Retreat. You mentioned like all the things you're working on. So where can people find you? What are you up to? Love on you.
Yeah, well, I think Instagram, all right, at Decolonizing Therapy, but also on our website, it's drjennifermullan.com or decolonizingtherapy.com. Either way, it merges into the same. And we are going to be having wait lists for upcoming Rage Retreat. And there's also going to be a wait list for a year-long unlearning process that is kind of like looking at the decolonizing therapy process, right? Like the DT method. So we have a curriculum and we're getting ready. So there'll be wait lists for people that are interested in that part and then people that want to focus more personally on rage. And signing up for our newsletter is probably the easiest way to do that. That's on our website or in our link tree. And that will keep you up to date with any discounts, places I'm going to talk about the book, any new things that are coming out. That'll give folks an option to work with us. We also have many courses, sliding scale, pay what you can. If you reach out to us, we'll never turn anyone away. We'll do our best to always support. We also have a Politicizing Your Practice series for group practices and organizations. Yeah.
So everything. Got it.
You know.
Well. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenn. Truly so grateful for you and for everything you're doing and just to be in your space. Like, just thank you.
That means a real lot. Thank you for having me. And again, thank you, Loveland Foundation. I'm deeply grateful.
Yes. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for a very special episode of The Unfolding, presented by the Loveland Foundation. At the Loveland Foundation, we are committed to showing up for communities of color in unique and powerful ways, with a particular focus on Black women and girls. Our resources and initiatives are collaborative and they prioritize opportunity, access, validation, and healing. Since our founding, the Therapy Fund has provided financial support for therapy to over 13,000 Black women, girls, and non-binary individuals across the country. This year, our goal is to provide free therapy to at least 6,000 more. If you'd like to join us and invest in generational change, visit our website at thelovelandfoundation.org for ways to give. To stay updated on new episodes and any future programming, follow us on Instagram and Meta, or check out our website at thelovelandfoundation.org.